You knew things you shouldn't have known, not facts. Those came easy. You knew when your mother was lying about being fine. You knew the teacher's marriage was unraveling before the other kids noticed she'd stopped wearing her ring. You were 7, maybe 8, and something inside you, some room in your chest that was far too large for your small body, was already filling with a weight that had no name. Everyone called it a gift. No one told you it would feel like exile. This video isn't about intelligence. It's about what happens to a child's nervous system when their mind outgrows their childhood, and what that child carries into adulthood when no one ever comes back to collect them from the place they were left. Stay, not because you need fixing, because there's a word for the ache you've been carrying since you were small enough to still need someone, and too perceptive to believe anyone would come. Here's something no one tells you about growing up with a mind that moved faster than the world around it. It wasn't the knowing that hurt. It was the alone. You sat in classrooms where the lesson ended for you 15 minutes before it ended for everyone else. And in that silence, that gap between your understanding and theirs, you built entire worlds. You dissected conversations like equations. You watched social dynamics the way other kids watched cartoons, tracking who was performing, who was afraid, who was pretending to laugh because the alternative was standing outside the circle entirely. You were a child. You were performing anthropology. And the thing that carved the deepest groove, the one you can still feel if you press on it, is that the adults around you saw the performance but missed the person. They saw the test scores, the vocabulary, the eerie composure. They said, "She's so mature for her age." They said, "He's going to do great things." They said, "You're so lucky." Lucky, as if comprehension without companionship is luck. As if building a cathedral inside your chest while everyone around you lives comfortably in studios is some kind of advantage. Here's a scene you'll recognize. You're at a family dinner, maybe 9 years old. The adults are talking about something. Money, a neighbor's divorce, someone's illness. They think you aren't listening, but you're mapping the entire conversation. You hear your uncle's deflection and recognize it as shame. You watch your grandmother's hand tighten on her glass and understand she's holding more than wine. You feel the architecture of this family's pain like a blueprint spreading across the dinner table. And you, 9 years old, holding a fork, carry it silently to bed that night and stare at the ceiling, turning it over and over, trying to find the load-bearing wall that, if fixed, might keep everything from falling down. No one asked you to do this. Your mind just did it. Automatically, relentlessly. You weren't lucky. You were early. Early to language, early to pattern, early to the devastating awareness that people are fragile and the world is not designed for honesty. And early, always early, to the particular loneliness of standing in a room full of people who cannot follow you where your mind has already gone. That loneliness didn't announce itself. It wore the costume of self-sufficiency. You stopped raising your hand, not because you didn't know, but because knowing had started to feel like trespass. You stopped explaining your reasoning because the explanation took longer than just giving the answer, and the look on people's faces when you explained, that flicker of something between admiration and distance, started to feel like a door closing. You learned, God, you learned this so young, that making yourself smaller was the price of belonging. That dimming your own lights was the only way to stop blinding the people you loved. You folded yourself into the shape of acceptable. And you did it so well that no one, not your parents, not your teachers, not the psychologist who tested you and handed your family a number like it was a diagnosis and a destination, ever thought to ask the only question that mattered? Are you lonely in there? And there's a reason this felt like more than loneliness. There's a reason it felt physical. Like your skin was thinner than everyone else's. Like sounds were louder, emotions were heavier. Like the tag on the back of your shirt was a small emergency your body couldn't ignore while your mind was busy solving the universe. A Polish psychiatrist named Kazimierz Dabrowski spent decades studying people with exceptional cognitive ability. And what he found wasn't what anyone expected. He discovered that high intelligence doesn't just mean faster processing. It means the entire nervous system is calibrated differently. He called them overexcitabilities, 5 channels through which gifted minds experience the world at amplified volume. Emotional, intellectual, imaginational, sensory, and psychomotor. Read that again. Not just intellectual intensity, emotional, sensory, imaginational. Your mind wasn't just quick. Your whole body was a receiving station tuned to frequencies most people never pick up. And there was no volume knob. There was no off switch. There was only the relentless, shimmering flood of more. More data, more feeling, more implication, more beauty, more dread, pouring through a body that still needed naps and bedtime stories and someone to cut the crusts off its sandwiches. That's why the fluorescent lights in your 3rd grade classroom felt aggressive. That's why you could feel the tension between your parents before they said a word. Not because you were anxious, but because your nervous system was reading micro-expressions, vocal pitch, the distance between their bodies at the kitchen counter, and assembling a full structural analysis before your conscious mind had even registered that something was wrong. You weren't overthinking. You were over-perceiving. There's a difference so vast it could swallow a childhood whole. And here's where it becomes cruel. Because your mind developed years ahead of your emotional architecture. Developmental researchers call this asynchronous development, and it's the defining feature of exceptionally gifted children. You could comprehend things your heart wasn't yet built to hold. You understood death at 5, not as an abstraction, as a physical fact. You lay in bed and felt the weight of it on your sternum like a hand pressing down, and you couldn't tell anyone because how do you explain to a parent that their kindergartner is grieving the finite nature of consciousness? You grasped injustice at 7. You saw hypocrisy in the adults who were supposed to be your ceiling, and your ceiling crumbled before you'd even finished building your walls. Imagine a building where the roof is installed before the foundation is set. The upper floors are stunning, vaulted ceilings, cathedral windows, rooms filled with light and complexity. But below, where the emotional support should be, where the sense of safety and belonging and simple, unexamined childhood joy should live, there are gaps, load-bearing walls that were never poured, haunted spaces that echo when you walk through them at night. You've been living in that building ever since. And you've gotten so good at furnishing those empty rooms with achievement, with usefulness, with the quiet performance of having it all together, that most people walk through your life and see a stunning structure. They don't hear the echo. Here's the part no one has the courage to say out loud. Your intelligence was never just a gift. It was also a wall. A beautiful, gleaming, structurally perfect wall that kept the world at exactly the distance your nervous system required to survive. And exactly the distance that guaranteed you would never fully be reached. It was the thing that let you understand the world, and the thing that separated you from it. It was the reason adults trusted you with information no child should carry. Their fears, their financial stress, their quiet despair, and the reason peers kept you at arm's length. Not because they disliked you, but because something in the way you looked at them made them feel seen in a way that was uncomfortable. You were a mirror they didn't ask for. And no one wants to befriend their own reflection when they're not ready to look. So you learned, in the way only children learn, which is to say, in the bones, that being fully known was dangerous. That if you showed someone the full architecture of your inner life, they would either worship it or flee from it. Neither response felt like love. One made you a trophy. The other made you a ghost. So you chose the third option, the one no test could measure. You built a hallway. A narrow, navigable version of yourself that people could walk through without getting lost. You kept the cathedral locked. You showed the world a well-lit corridor, impressive enough to earn praise, small enough to avoid threat. And you lived your real life in the rooms no one could find. The room where you cried over a passage in a book that nobody else in your grade had read. The room where you raged at the sheer inefficiency of a world that punished honesty. The room where you sat alone with questions so large that even asking them out loud felt like standing at the edge of something that didn't have a railing. This is what psychologist James Webb described when he studied existential depression in gifted children. Not clinical depression born from chemical imbalance, but a profound, a bone-deep confrontation with the largest questions a human mind can hold. Why do people suffer and pretend they don't? What is the point of systems that reward compliance over truth? If I can see the cracks in everything, every institution, every relationship, every comforting story adults tell themselves, does that mean everything is broken? Or does it mean something is wrong with my eyes? Most people don't ask these questions until midlife, if ever. You asked them when you still believed in the tooth fairy. And no one answered, because no one knew you were asking. So you answered yourself. You built frameworks. You constructed philosophies in the margins of your notebooks. On the backs of quizzes you finished in half the allotted time in the 4 a.m. A dark of a bedroom that smelled like clean laundry and felt like a mission control center. You became the architect of your own meaning. And the weight of that project, the sheer structural load of carrying an existential framework that most adults avoid their entire lives, pressed down on a body that still needed someone to sit on the edge of the bed and say, "You don't have to figure this out tonight." But here's something that might help you breathe for a moment. The research, including work by Maureen Neihart, Linda Silverman, and decades of longitudinal studies on profoundly gifted individuals, has consistently found something the IQ number will never tell you. The same neural architecture that produces extraordinary cognitive ability also produces extraordinary empathy, extraordinary moral sensitivity, and an extraordinary capacity for beauty. Dabrowski's overexcitabilities aren't 5 separate dials. They're one instrument, tuned to one frequency, depth. The mind that grasps abstract physics at 8 is the same mind that feels the texture of a stranger's grief at 30. The pattern recognition that made school boring is the same pattern recognition that makes you the friend people call at midnight because you always understand what they can't yet say. Your gift and your wound live in the same room. They always have. They share a wall. And the tragedy isn't that you have both. The tragedy is that everyone celebrated the gift while you sat with the wound, alone, in a locked cathedral, waiting for someone to knock. Hey, if your chest just tightened, that's okay. You don't have to do anything with that right now. Just notice it. Just let the room hold you for a second. That's enough. Can we talk about what you lost? Not your potential. Everyone talks about your potential. Your parents talked about it at conferences. Your teachers talked about it in recommendation letters. The gifted program coordinator talked about it like it was a natural resource, something to be extracted, refined, and never, ever wasted. Your potential was a public conversation. Your pain was a private one. And between those two, between what everyone saw and what no one asked, you disappeared. What you lost was permission. Permission to not know. Permission to struggle visibly and receive comfort instead of alarm. Permission to be average at something, to be bad at a sport, to misspell a word, and to fail a test without feeling the entire structural integrity of your identity beginning to buckle. Because when your worth is built on being the one who knows, not knowing isn't just uncomfortable. It's an architectural emergency. The roof shudders, the walls crack. Everything you've built to justify your existence in a world where you never quite fit threatens to come down. And you who can calculate the tensile strength of every relationship in the room, cannot afford that collapse. So you never let yourself not know. and the cost of always knowing was this: you never got to learn the way other children learn. Slowly, messily, with skinned knees and wrong answers, and the gorgeous, chaotic luxury of not caring whether you were doing it right. You lost the right to a tantrum. Because when a gifted child melts down, adults don't see a child overwhelmed by a nervous system running at twice the amperage of their peers. They see ingratitude. They see waste. They see a child who should know better, as if cognitive comprehension and emotional regulation are the same building, when in truth they aren't even on the same block. You understood quantum theory and couldn't regulate a wave of sadness at a birthday party. And instead of someone kneeling down and saying, "Your feelings are big because you are big inside," "You're too smart for this." Too smart for this. As if intelligence were anesthesia. As if IQ points could be traded for emotional immunity. You lost play, not all of it, but the unself-conscious kind. The kind where you vanish into the game without part of your mind hovering above, watching, analyzing, narrating. And you observed yourself play. You watched yourself be a child from a slight permanent remove. And watching yourself be a child, monitoring, assessing, never quite surrendering, is not the same as being one. And you lost. This is the one that might sting, so take a breath. You lost the luxury of simple belonging, because belonging requires a particular kind of cognitive surrender. It requires the ability to not notice, to not track the subtext, to not feel the structural instability of a group dynamic while everyone else is just hanging out, just existing in each other's presence without reading the blueprints. Your mind wouldn't let you not notice. And so you stood at the edge of every circle, part of it and apart from it simultaneously. An architect at a party full of people who just wanted to dance. And you told yourself the view from the periphery was just as good. It wasn't. You know it wasn't. You were a child. You deserved to be held without being handled, loved without being leveraged, seen without being showcased. And if no one has said this to you yet, to the version of you that learned to carry all of this before your hands were big enough to hold a pencil properly, I'm saying it now. You did not fail at childhood. Childhood wasn't built for the size of what you were carrying. So where does that leave you? Here. Exactly here. In a body that still braces when someone praises your intelligence. Because you've learned, through years of repetition, that admiration is just distance wearing a nicer outfit. In a mind that still solves problems at 3 in the morning, not because you want to, but because the machinery won't stop, and stillness feels like something you haven't earned. In a life that looks from the outside like the structure everyone expected, and feels from the inside like a cathedral no one has ever entered. You've spent decades living in the hallway, showing people the narrow corridor, keeping the real rooms locked because the last time you opened a door, the last time you let someone see the full scope, the full height, the full aching beauty of what lives inside you, they either couldn't hold it or tried to curate it, or stood in the center of your cathedral and commented on the architecture instead of asking how it felt to live there alone. But here's what I need you to hear, and I need you to hear it not in your mind. Your mind has heard enough. Your mind has been working since before you had words for what it was doing. I need you to hear it in the place below your thinking, in the place that still remembers what it felt like to be small and awake at 2 a.m., with a question too big for your bedroom and no one to carry it to. The cathedral was never the problem. The problem was that you were asked to build it alone. And the most remarkable discovery in contemporary neuroscience, the one that should matter more to you than any test score ever did, is this: your brain is not finished. Research on neuroplasticity, including foundational work by neuroscientist Michael Merzenich, has demonstrated that the neural pathways carved by early isolation, by chronic hypervigilance, by decades of performing self-sufficiency as a survival strategy, They can be rewritten, not erased. Rewritten. You don't lose the cathedral. You don't lose the perception, the depth, the shimmering, almost unbearable sensitivity that Dabrowski identified as the engine of your experience. But the foundation, the one that was never properly poured, the one that should have been laid by hands other than your own, you can build it now, slowly, deliberately, with people who are willing to stand in the full room and not flinch, not worship, not flee, just stay. This isn't about becoming someone new. It's about letting the original architecture breathe, removing the false walls you built at 9, opening windows in the rooms you sealed at 12, letting light into the spaces you locked when no one came to find you there. And it starts with something that will feel almost impossibly counterintuitive for a mind like yours. Stop solving yourself. You are not a problem to be optimized. You are not potential to be managed. You are not a building that needs to justify its own square footage. You are a human being who was handed an instrument of extraordinary sensitivity before anyone taught you it was okay to set it down. And the act of setting it down, not forever, not in defeat, but in rest, in trust, in the radical, terrifying experiment of letting someone else carry something for 5 minutes, is not waste. It's the first thing you were never given permission to do. So here's what I want you to try. Not today, not perfectly, just once when the moment finds you. Put your hand on your chest. Feel the architecture you've built in there. The rooms, not the corridors, the vast and echoing spaces that have held your intelligence and your loneliness and your impossible, aching aliveness for longer than you should have had to hold them alone. And whisper to yourself, not as a mantra, not as a performance of healing, but as a fact spoken quietly to a child who needed to hear it 30 years ago. You can rest now. The room is big enough for both of us. The one who knows everything and the one who just wanted to be held. You weren't too much. You were just in rooms that were too small for what you carried. And if this found you tonight, if something in your chest shifted even slightly, even for half a breath, then the cathedral isn't empty anymore. Someone just walked in. Comment, I was that kid if something in this hit a wall you've been pretending isn't there. Not for the algorithm, not for me. For the 7-year-old who thought they were the only one awake at that hour. And if you know someone who grew up carrying this, the quiet, brilliant, lonely weight of understanding too much too soon, send them this. Not to explain them, not to diagnose them, just so they know that someone somewhere finally described the room they've been living in alone.